can hear us.
This is Beach Talk Radio.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. This is your captain speaking, Mean Gene. Mean Gene. The following will be a test of the ship's whistle, the sonar alarm, the cable alarm, and the atomic attack alarm.
Hello, America, and welcome to the #1 radio station in all of Fort Myers Beach. Beach Talk Radio. Here are your hosts, Kim and Ed Ryan.
And a good Friday evening, everybody. Welcome to a special edition, a special episode of Beach Talk Radio, or afternoon, right? We have a very special guest that is coming on with us. As you all know, there is an attempt to recall Councilman John King and Councilwoman Karen Woodson down on Fort Myers Beach. You're pointing there and you're making me read, and I don't want to read.
Say before we get any further that it has come to our attention that we look a little red. It's got to be these lights Ed's using. So
yeah, we don't use the studio often at home anymore.
We are fine,
and everything seems to be working now. So as I was saying, there's a recall that is kind of in progress. The first set of signatures have been verified by the Lee County Elections Board, and now they are in their 60, just started their 60 days to get 505 signatures, which would be 15%. But in the meantime, both Karen and John have filed a lawsuit to try and have the recall stopped. And with us right now is Morgan Bentley, who is representing both Karen and John in the recall. And Morgan, how are you?
I'm good. You guys look great. I mean, you look like
you were the one who accused us of being red, by the way.
I don't really think that was an accusation. It was a statement of fact. We do look really red.
So the beach. So shouldn't you? This is Beach Talk Radio.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
if you're white, like you're all pasty.
The first question I have for you is, from what I understand, you were appointed to the Florida Commission on Ethics twice by the state legislature. Can you kind of explain what that Commission on Ethics is and what your role there was?
Yeah, no. So it's funny. It was, I knew what it was, but I hadn't had any interaction with it before I got appointed. And it turned out it's a really great experience. First off, just like the people there that work there, it's amazing how committed they are. A lot of them have been there for decades and decades, and it was just a really great chapter in my life, I guess you'd say. But what the Ethics Commission does is, after Watergate, for those of us who are old enough to remember that, Florida, believe it or not, was kind of on the cutting edge of creating these ethics panels. Before that, believe it or not, they didn't exist anywhere. And Florida and some other states, but mainly Florida, came up with some early guidance. We could spend a lot of time talking about whether that should be updated or not. For instance, there were years where the rules only applied to corporations and not LLCs. And as you well know, 90% of new entities are LLCs. So there's little things like that. But basically what it does is it regulates two main things. One is financial. They make people who are running for office or who are in certain levels of government, not everyone, but in certain levels of government, disclose in general their finances so that people will know, hey, this guy's associated with that corporation or that group of people or what have you. It's just a way of knowing, kind of, follow the money type of thing. The other thing, though, very specifically, is there are rules against elected officials having contractual relationships with those who come in front of their boards. And then after they're off a board, there are rules about how they can lobby the board they were just on. And that's a lot. That actually is very effective to keep kind of what we see in Washington sometimes is, a guy's a congressman and then he quits, and a week later he's lobbying the same group, and it just doesn't, has a weird feel to it, right? And so Florida is a little bit stricter than that. And so it was a great experience.
Would that commission be the commission that, if there was an allegation of somebody violating a sunshine law on a town council or city council or a county government, would they file it with that commission?
They could. It's funny you asked about that particular statute, though. So that particular statute, Sunshine Act, has been just the subject of a lot of litigation over the last 10 years. There are groups all around the state, but some pretty well known. There's the Florida Center for Governmental Accountability. There's the ACLU, obviously, has filed a lot. And on both sides, this isn't a political thing. They're on both sides of the spectrum. There are groups that seek to enforce the Sunshine Act pretty vigorously in the courts. And so you don't see it so much going through review with the state anymore. You see it pretty much people just run straight to court on Sunshine Act violations. And that's also true, by the way, of public records violations. Although they've tightened that up a little bit the last few years. It's a little bit harder to do than it used to be. But both of those are just hotbeds of litigation.
Yeah. So
I say that I should be happier about it since I'm a lawyer. That should be a good thing, right? But it does seem to. I kind of feel bad for elected officials lately. You know how much slings and arrows they get. But.
So on to the Fort Myers Beach situation.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a recall, and so I wanted to kind of start from the beginning about the way the whole recall was set up and get your opinion on that. On this, would you agree or disagree that the legislature has framed the recall process to make it hard on the recallers, 2 rounds of signatures and an election, but not impossible because the recall petitions can be somewhat vague, and then if you get enough signatures, it goes before the voters. So if they accomplish those 2 steps, the voters are sufficiently pissed off at the people that are on the board for whatever reason. Did the legislature leave that sort of loophole in the process so the voters could decide?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question as framed. No, I think the courts have made it difficult for the recallers. The statute itself is really vague. All it talks about is malfeasance, misfeasance, and believe it or not, drunkenness, which always makes me smile because I'm like, drunk when exactly? Like, you know, am I
Sure.
Like at work or
right,
like
right. And you know, I guess if you're a good commissioner and you're drunk, what do I care? But it's a older statute, and so it has a lot of wiggle room when you just read it, and which I'm sure you have. But the way the courts have interpreted it has put some meat on the bones of it, and so we do know what it means to say malfeasance or misfeasance. It's not just I get to accuse you of it, and that makes it true. So we know that the courts have made it a little bit higher burden, and so I guess that's the way I would answer your question is yes, based on the way the courts have interpreted the statute.
Okay. Would you agree or disagree that just generally a
Violation
violation
on a game show? I like this. Good.
I know.
Okay, agree. Can I phone a friend?
a violation of the Sunshine Law or accepting gifts? Let's say the town's limit is $25. You can accept something for $25 or less. Or so it's a violation of the Sunshine Law or accepting gifts more than $25 would be something that could be listed on a recall petition. That would fit into the criteria of misfeasance or malfeasance, those 2 things.
Yeah, we're getting closer. Yeah, arguably, yes. However, we're back to remember what's required is malfeasance or misfeasance. So the simple violation of a statute does not itself necessarily equate to malfeasance. It could. I'm not saying it can't, but it's not ipso facto type of thing. But yeah, at least now we're closer to if someone violated a statute, then perhaps you're getting there. But then you've got the same argument as before, which is which statutes. If I am an inherent speeder and I go through every speed zone 10 miles over the limit, is that malfeasance in my role as a commissioner? No. So it really depends on the context. But yes, at least at that point, you're talking about the violation of the statute. So.
Okay, so I guess I don't feel like I don't understood the answer. So if there's an allegation of a violation of the Sunshine Law or accepting gifts would clearly be a violation. Both of them would clearly be a violation of the town's charter, I believe. because the town goes to great lengths the town attorney goes to great lengths to teach everybody, even on the committees, not to violate the sunshine law, not to talk to each other about issues that could come before the board. So yes or no, would those two things be able to be put on the petition and fit into those 7 criteria, malfeasance and misfeasance, the 2 of the 7?
Okay. That's actually 2 questions. One is, yes, it could be put on the petition.
Okay.
Because that's the way the process works, is you get to decide what's on the petition first. Right. And then would it constitute? That's the $64,000 question. Right. So we don't know yet whether that would actually constitute. And you may be about to ask this question because I feel like you're pretty well prepared with these questions. So what's the process for making that determination? There's 2. Was that your next question? I didn't mean to jump in.
No. My next question is, do you actually have to have proof of a violation of the sunshine law or that a council member accepted gifts? Because we had Veach on the show when they first launched. I don't know if you watched any of that. When they first launched this recall, and he was not willing to give in proof. And at the time, I think we were all like virgins to this whole process because it doesn't happen a lot. So I was perplexed by the fact that he didn't want to give up the proof, or he almost made it seem like
he doesn't need it.
Right. So in your opinion, do you think you need to have proof?
Absolutely. And that's where the cases come in. So what the cases are clear about is, look, recall petitions are there for a very good reason, which is if you have a bad commissioner or elected official, there needs to be a vehicle by which the electorate can say, okay, made a mistake on that one. Let's get the guy or gal off the commission, right? That's what it's there for. However, it's also flying in the face of the normal electoral process. So, and I'll just use the numbers you used earlier. So if you think about it, someone could get elected with 90% of the vote, right? 9 out of 10 people in Fort Myers Beach voted for somebody. 15% of those people can put them back through an election again, which is really not only invasive, it's really expensive. I mean, elections they're not free. And so the people of Fort Myers Beach are going to have to incur this cost, which is a long-winded way of answering your question. Is so the courts have said, yeah, we need to have some level of at least a bar of proof, because otherwise you're undoing potentially the elective process, and B, you're costing the public a lot of money. That if there's no proof, why would we go through either one of those? And that's really where the courts have landed on all of this. So long-winded answer to your question is yes, you have to have proof.
Because what we heard in the beginning was what I believe they even said on the show, we don't need the proof. We can just put it down on the recall and go forward with that. So is that true that you can just put it down, make the whatever allegations you're making, put it on paper, even if it's, general? I mean, there hasn't been any specific, so-and-so specifics to that. Right. And then go forward. And then when does it get called into question? I mean, because once the signatures are collected, isn't the damage done?
Potentially, yeah. If God hadn't made courthouses, the answer would be yes. But that's where the courts come in. So the way these get adjudicated really is 2 ways. So you've got the process itself, which is the one you guys are talking about, which is you basically you get a free shot. Is you get to go out and collect signatures for 10% of the electorate, and then that triggers a notice. In other words, if they only get 9%, it doesn't go any further.
It's dead, yeah.
Yeah. If they get 10, then the other side, in this case, Commissioner King and Commissioner Woodson, they get an opportunity to do a defense petition, which we have done. We've submitted it to the clerk. And then the petitioners have to combine those into a single, when they're getting the 15%, they have to have both. And so, yes, then they go out and they get their 500 and some odd. So you had the exact number actually earlier.
505.
505. Well, good for you. I say save me the math because I hadn't done it yet. then they have to go get that. If they only get 14, then that's the end of the road for that. If they get 15, then there would be an election process, unless there is an injunction. And usually when you read the cases, that's where these get decided, is at the injunction, either during or between the recall process and the election itself. And again, there's kind of a reason for that, is because you don't want to have to make everyone spend all the money on the election. You want to decide it before the election so you don't have to spend all that money.
Right. So in the research, we've got 3 dogs. So
Yes, so
if you see anybody leave the room, it's because of the dogs.
It's not you.
Good.
So in the research that we've done, Morgan, it feels like when it gets to a court, the judge or the court does not really want to rule on the legality of the charge, whether the charge is true or false. The judge wants to just rely on whether the 3 or whatever the number of issues fits into the criteria, which is why I asked you the questions earlier before about the Sunshine Law and the gifts. So are you not worried a little bit that, did I ask you a question?
No, I think you're jumping ahead. Just let me ask this one question. So what are the statutory requirements for a recall? Because it looks like you said in some paperwork that that hadn't been met. So
in this paperwork or
no,
another?
In this.
Yeah. So there are 7. The big,
is that the misfeasance, malfeasance?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, exactly. Drunkenness. Don't forget drunkenness. That's my favorite one. But there are others that are also pretty vague, like incompetence is one. And, obviously that's a little bit of eye of the beholder, right? Is that, incompetence is going to be. So, but then incapacity, I think is in there. I'll just tell you what they are. Hang on.
Yeah. And there's also commit a felony or something like that.
Of moral turpitude, not just any felony. It's got to be moral turpitude. So, yeah, I mean, just in terms of making those statements. However, what the courts have said is you can't just parrot the words, right? Because then I could just have a recall anytime I want.
Sure.
And that's, like I said earlier, that you're balancing these 2 public interests. And so if I just parrot the words of the statute, that's not sufficient. And so at some level, there has to be some proffer. And you're right. If it's a he said, she said kind of thing, then you're right. The court probably would defer to the electorate and say, you guys battle this out in the court of public opinion. The good news for Commissioner King and Commissioner Woodson is they didn't do it. I mean, they didn't do any of these things. This isn't one where it's like, well, tomato.
Right.
Literally didn't do it. And so it's a lot more black and white than you might think. So
if I could finish my question, it was a long question, and then you totally interrupted, dear.
Yeah.
So the
I mean,
are y'all married?
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah. And we do this. And we do this every Saturday and Sunday too, by the way.
And then we don't talk the rest of the week. It's perfect. So
the question I have is, the research that we've done is that it seems like the judge does not want to get in the, in ruling whether the allegations, like a judge might, I guess it depends on the judge, right? The judge might say, look, this is a sunshine violation and the gift thing, and that fits into misfeasance and malfeasance, and let the electorate decide. You earlier you said bad commissioner. There are people on the beach because of the Seagate vote that feel like John and Karen are bad commissioners. Now, I don't want to get into the Seagate thing just yet, but if that criteria fits into that, does it worry you a little bit? The judge will just say, listen, it fits, let the electorate decide.
Oh yeah, I mean, anyone who's been around the courts understands that, there is no, I've been through a lot of trials in my life, and I have won many that I thought I didn't have a prayer, and I've lost many that I thought, how could I possibly lose that trial? Now, for the most part though, having said that, for the most part though, there is kind of a realm in which the possibilities. Is it possible that a judge would do that? Yes, absolutely. And that's what we worry about, frankly. And there's even a specific, there's competing doctrines always, right? So you have competing public policies on almost every issue. And the competing public policy here would be, well, if you let it go through an election and the recallers lose, then that's actually really good in a way, because it sends a message that, hey, listen, good, bad, or indifferent, this was vetted by the electorate and they chose to keep the commissioners in place. And so that is also in the back of my mind, that some judges would see that as a beneficial thing. So I guess, yeah, you always worry about these kinds of things. You're 100% correct to pick that up. Were you reading cases? Is that where you got that?
Oh yeah.
All right, good.
Speaking of cases,
here we go. He's going to be Mr. Smarty Smartpants.
You referenced. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but you referenced Motri versus Davis several times in the filing. That was a 1986 case in Riviera Beach where a recall, I'm just kind of paraphrasing now. The recall committee objected to the councilman Motri voting to fire the police chief. They called it misfeasance, but that was clearly a case where he voted he couldn't fire. He was a town council member. He took a vote during a town council vote. And so that was kicked out. That would be like putting Seagate on the petition. You can't put Seagate. They were smart. They didn't do that. They didn't put Seagate on the petition because it was a vote. It was a valid vote from the whole council. So how do you see that case that you referenced several times helping out Karen and John?
Well, it's the starting point is, and this is actually great because so the nuance of that is, it opens the door, right? So Motri opens the door to this conversation of, is it sufficient? And then you get into what you just talked about, which is define sufficiency. Are we just talking about the allegations, the naked allegations on the complaint, or on the recall petition rather, or are we talking about the underlying sufficiency of the allegations themselves? That's going to be issue one for the court to have to get their head around. And of course, the flip side of the argument is, Judge, just like forget about a recall petition, just a normal complaint is, you have to have sufficient facts in a complaint to support the conclusory allegations you're making. You don't get to just say, I breached a contract. You have to say something about how I breached that contract. Now, if you do that, you can kind of get past some initial stages. A little bit tighter here, though, because of what the implications are. So, yeah, I would expect that the recall committees would have to. They wouldn't be able to say the same thing to a court as I said to you, which is, we don't have to prove anything. And I think most judges are going to say, wait, you want me to defer in the face of you telling me you don't have to even show me that you're telling the truth? Right. Like, you're going to make me order an election when I don't know whether you're even telling the truth or not? That's a big ask of the judge. And so I think that's the conversation that's going to be had. But you're right. It could go a different way. But I think that's the way the conversation will go.
Go ahead.
Are we going to talk about?
Yes. Let me get through this. I put it in perfect order. Okay. Yeah. So this Garvin versus Jerome case that you mentioned too, which was a Daytona Beach vice mayor, she faced 5 accusations and the court invalidated either 3 or 4 of them. I'm not sure how many, but and then I believe the court kicked it out because, okay, you got a recall petition almost all the way to a vote on 5 specific allegations. Now the court kicks out 4, you only have 1. So the court says, I'm not really sure the electorate would have kicked the vice mayor out on just 1 allegation. So this whole thing is invalidated. Is part of your strategy to take one of those 3 allegations against John and Karen, like for instance, this peer conversation, which is, I don't even know how that's a violation of anything because the peer is owned by the county, and on John's, John had one too. Let's see. John's first one was a private conversation. Oh no, John's third one that I thought was sketchy was that he demanded people get fired, which he was even talking about. Bill Veach was even talking about Jason Green, who's still on the staff. He did a presentation at the town council today. So it's part of your strategy to get one or 2 of those kicked off, those 3, and then say, okay, maybe the backup is they thought there was going to be 3 and now there's only 1.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take what I can get, right? I mean, if that's if that's where I land, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But I don't think that's my first strategy. My first strategy is to win all three or two, depending on which one. But yeah, absolutely. And the reason they do that, by the way, is the same reason. Since you seem to follow this stuff pretty closely, you know how when we do ballot initiatives for like constitutional amendments, and they're super specific about how the wording is going to go, and if the wording isn't right, they bounce the whole thing. So it's you could read it and figure it out, but if it's not in the way that they want, then the whole petition goes out the window. And the reason they do that is for the reason you just said, which is we can't read the mind of the electorate, right? So if we give them three things and two of them are bad, how do we know? Or even if one of them is bad, how do we know that the people that voted weren't all voting on the one that was bad?
Right.
Mhm.
And so you kind of are stuck. Like once you've done one bad one, you have to invalidate the whole petition, because you can't unscramble the egg, because we can't ask people, hey, I saw you just voted for this. Like, which one did you vote for? We don't do that in this country. So so you almost are required. Well, we know they're required, but that's why they're required, is because otherwise you just you'd never know. That's why they do it that way.
So how, when you're
Great questions, though. This is
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Lot
took
of
the whole
homework.
day off and did his homework this time. When it's something I like the environment, he's practically mute, like I am right now. When you're talking about winning all three, or those things, how do you, like, I can see how the other side makes an allegation. Here's the proof, but how do you defend you didn't do it? Like, how do you have proof of not doing something?
Okay, well, yeah, proving the negative is what that's called, and that's always difficult.
Yes.
So, I mean, not to like go too far ahead, but I mean, you're hitting the core issue on the nail on the head, which is we're sitting here with sort of, open mouths going, what are you talking about? Right? Is, take the firing issue, right? Like, one council member cannot fire a staff person.
Right.
I mean, even if it'd be like me walking into McDonald's and firing the guy behind the counter. Like, okay, you could say I tried to fire the guy behind McDonald's, but it doesn't, like, it's a nothing burger at that point, right? So a commissioner can't fire someone. So why are we even talking about this? That's kind of an example. The other one is, you talk about taking gifts, and it's like, I don't have any gifts in my possession, so how did I take any gifts? Now, if I had a new boat, okay,
Sure.
then maybe we're talking about, maybe there's a reason for that or not, but I don't have a new boat. And so we're frankly would love to know what they're talking about. And hey, if they've got great stuff, then bring it on. And that would be lovely, but that's not where we're at.
Well, we do know what they're talking about, because
Well, let
they
me
talk.
just ask. Let me just ask. Have you done this? Have you been involved with other recall? Okay, so in your experience, have other recall petitions listed more specifically when they're saying why they want to recall these people? Are they more specific, or do they just sort of keep it general like that on purpose?
Typically speaking, if you've got the goods on someone, you tend to shove it down their throat.
Okay.
And so if I catch your hand in the cookie jar and I got a picture of it, I'm probably going to give you that picture, right? That's the way it goes. So normally where these things usually arise is from third-party sources, like a newspaper investigation, or someone got in trouble with some kind of legal trouble, whether it's criminal or civil, it doesn't much matter. And there's a separate investigation which resulted in a conclusion. Okay. And then they take that conclusion and say, all right, don't take my word for it. Look at this, whatever it is, whatever report, investigation, whatever it may be. But we don't have that here, right? So this isn't like, let's just take the Sunshine Act case. So let's say there was a violation of the Sunshine Act and somebody sued over it, one of those groups I mentioned earlier. And they lost, right? And they came out and they said, well, Commissioner King or Commissioner Woodson violated the Sunshine Act. Okay, then you can say, Commissioner King violated it, see case number.
Right.
Fine, go read it for yourself. But that's like I little bit of a broken record. That's not where we're at.
Nope.
We literally don't know what they're talking about. And I think it's a little unfair, honestly. I'd be curious if I was a little, a fly on the wall when these recall petitioner volunteers are out there asking people. Love to know what they're telling them.
Well, funny you should say that, Morgan.
You dovetailed right into his next question.
We were sent several emails from they started doing it by email with people in the community. I'm guessing they had old voter lists from the election. That's my guess. I don't know that for a fact. And somebody forwarded that, didn't sign it, and it clearly says that it says nothing about violation of the Sunshine Law. It says nothing about gifts. It says nothing about anything in the petition. It says the community has had enough of the wanton disregard of our comprehensive plan and land development code. Everything on with this has been about Seagate. When they go door to door, we've heard that they're talking about Seagate and other big development. They're not saying anything about the Sunshine Law or gifts or anything like that. It's completely that they're not following the comprehensive plan and the land development code. So my question to you is, how is that not fraud?
No, no comment. Yeah.
Do you need an attorney to answer that question? Or, I mean, it's totally not what the recall's about. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. That's kind of been our point all along. This really is about Seagate, right? I mean, that's what this is. So I guess you're the fly on the wall, and have answered my question for me. I'm not surprised.
He's not going to say.
All right, I'll forward that to you. So let's see. The first step is this case here. And Bill and Ray have to defend themselves. They can't just ignore it. They have to defend themselves. They can decide to defend themselves, or they can decide to get an attorney or whatever. But they have 20 days now. I think you served them today, or it seemed like the summons was online. So they have 20 days to respond. Even if they win this case, you can appeal it, correct? And then even if you lose the appeal, you can take it to the Florida Supreme Court. This could stretch out until the next election, correct?
Okay. So that's 3 questions.
Okay.
Yes, they have to defend themselves. Number 1. Number 2, yes, we can take an appeal. Number 3, no on the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, believe it or not, is unless it's a death penalty case or a municipal bond case. Now, you may think that's funny because I do, that the 2 that you get to go to the Supreme Court for sure are death penalty and municipal bonds. Everything else is discretionary. So you have to ask them to hear your case, and you have to have a reason like, hey, we're a split of circuits. You know, the first DCA says one thing and the third DCA says another. That's one. Big constitutional questions, of course, might get a review. Issues of great public importance might get a review.
Okay.
But you have to ask. It's not automatic.
Yeah. So this is decided, could be decided in this court or the appellate court.
Correct.
And so here's I don't know if you can see the comments, but Janet lives on the beach. She said she's had 2 women come to her house and spoke about the Seagate, nothing about the issues. So, I mean, it's not like it's hard to find what's going on down there. They're open about it, Morgan. And I don't know if that means anything. I mean, is that something you
he said it on our...
And he said it on our show.
On our show. I mean...
So, I mean...
Is that a problem?
For them.
For them. I mean, or
no,
can
I
they
like these, by the way, I like these comments that I'm getting. First of all,
you might not like all of them. Sometimes we get some sideways
Not tonight,
one.
though. Not tonight.
All right, good.
So, go ahead. He's too busy reading the comments now.
I'm surprised. Like, okay, so I will confess I'm not familiar with Beach Talk Radio.
It's all right.
I know, but now I do. So let's open my eyes. Some really good audience participation.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
People are really engaged down there on the beach. You know, maybe not this issue as much as the Seagate issue for sure. I mean, there were a lot of people against it, and you probably know there's a writ that's going on in court. That's probably the right way to do this. You take it to court, let a judge decide if it needs to be kicked back to the council and let them reconsider it. That's perfectly normal for people on the beach. That's the way the process is done. Unfortunately, it's going to cost those residents a lot of money, but that is, I agree with it doing it that way, not this way.
Well,
not lying about people.
I don't think you didn't get a chance to ask before he, is them saying, that it's more about Seagate, or even saying stuff like that. Is that a problem for their side? Or just
it is. And that's the kind of thing that really, you use the word fraud. It just taints the process, if nothing else. And I know people, they're passionate about it. I understand that politics gets, everyone gets fired up about politics these days. So, and which is, in a way is good, right? It shows people are engaged, but in a way it leads to problems like that. Is I can't tell you one thing and get you to sign something, which, by the way, what people don't realize when they sign is every single person who signs is now a member of the committee.
Yeah.
So in theory, they're all plaintiffs. They're all defendants, and I know that when you've probably been stopped at Publix, people ask you to sign stuff and you're not thinking, oh, I could be a party to this case now. Right. They're not thinking that, but they are. And so I'm sure they're not explaining that to them. And there's just a lot about the process that it's unfortunate, I think, that we kind of get off, the horse gets out of the barn and we get to the point we're at now before anyone has to actually put their cards on the table. And I think that's, if I had a magic wand and could go back in time and rewrite the statute, I would add something like that there has
Make
to
sure
be,
there's proof.
Yeah. Let's get to the baseline before we start doing all this. But
well, I think that was your question in the beginning. Was it set up, the legislature wanted to give that loophole and that latitude to people who wanted to recall, but it kind of opened up this avenue where people can just seemingly say whatever and start going forward.
Did you read the Wink? I know you were quoted in the Wink story that Jillian did yesterday. Did you read the story? Did you see it?
I did not. I had
no worries. I want to fill you in on
I had a house guest show up last night, so from out of town. So I was.
So Murphy said that it's a shame that the town is picking up the cost for your fees and we have to defend ourselves, which, I mean, it brought tears to my eyes that he has to defend himself, being that they started the whole thing and now he's trying to blame it on somebody else. But the other thing is that in this story, Veach says that, well, now we'll be able to see how popular she is. If she's popular, she should be happy to go through with this. And I said to myself, what the fuck is this guy talking about? How did this recall that he started become a popularity contest? That they do that every 4 years down there. It's called an election. I mean, that the whole thing was bizarre to read and listen to.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Was there a question in there, sir? Can you rephrase that?
So I guess one of the last questions we have for you is, okay, so people are going out. I don't want to say it's your last question. And they're saying, John, you violated the Sunshine Law. John, you accepted gifts from blah, 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 whoever it was that you accepted gifts from, and his reputation's being damaged. And the person that's saying those allegations clearly hasn't provided any proof. So in my opinion, knows it is untrue, malice. Did John and Karen have a slander case against these two?
Man, you asked some good questions. So the answer is yes, but. So, and I'll give you the spiel I tell every client that asks about defamation. So defamation is one of those counts that is really easy to plead and really hard to prove. And the reason is because, yes, there are, first of all, general defamation, right? Just saying bad things about people. And then there's a thing called defamation per se. So if I accuse you of a crime, or I accuse you of a loathsome disease, or I denigrate your business, those are, defamation per se, which means I don't have to actually prove any damage. Because the hard part of defamation cases is proving damage. Because if I say, oh, this guy's a thief,
Mhm.
right? So this guy over here is a thief, but nobody believes me.
Mhm.
He doesn't. I mean, then he's not damaged, right? So I mean, there's no claim. But when you get into the world of politics, then there's a whole other layer of privilege that comes into play, which
Right.
is related to free speech. It's related to limited privilege. In Congress, there's even a speech and debate clause that specifically protects types of political speech, and the courts are very wary of wading into the court of public opinion. Is the marketplace of ideas and the sharp elbows of politics is supposed to be the way we deal with these things, and they really, really don't want to get involved. Now, having said that, they have and they will get involved. And if you can, the hardest thing you mentioned malice. Did you find that in your research too?
Well, yeah, years of research with that word.
Yeah. So that's the biggie. That's the 600-pound gorilla in the room. Is when you're an elected official, you got to prove malice.
Yeah.
And unless someone's just going to jump up and down and say I did it solely because I hate you, which no one's ever going to say, you're really got an uphill climb to prove malice. Now, people do say it. I'm not saying it's never happened, but to say it's the sole reason you did something, most people try to dress it up a little better than that.
But they know, if this is just my opinion, they know that the stuff they are saying is not true. They know that. And there's something in that statute.
But
that
do you have to prove
when you
that?
know that you're telling people, you're lying about people. Now, if John and Karen decide they want to run again next year, this is damaging their reputation. Dinking all along the way. Now, I'm not speaking for them. They may decide they don't want to do it and they don't want to run or anything like that. They don't want to go through all this crap. But I mean, to me, it just seems like it fits into, at least this thing fits into them knowingly saying things about people that are not true to try and get something through the back door on the Seagate vote.
Well, Ed, I think you're touching on a point that is a larger point in society, because these aren't the first politicians that have been subject to things like this.
Sure.
You asked about the ethics board at the outset. One of the things that we did change when I was up there was people used to do that with the ethics board, as they would file an ethics complaint, and then they'd run an ad saying this guy's the subject of an ethics complaint. And so we had to change the statute to avoid that. And that happened. I mean, it took us a couple of years, and it was every August and November, we'd get a flood of complaints that never went anywhere. They weren't valid. They were dead on arrival, but they would file them 10 days before the election. And the last weekend of the election, all you'd see is
negative ads,
TV ads. Yeah. So I think that's a little bit of what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I
long
you
shot.
probably don't have, how long is this show for?
Yeah, no, I know, right? Hence the need for really good writing when you're writing those statutes and ethics rules up.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I hold on there. So
y'all should have your own show, just the two of you.
Yeah,
a lot of people have said that we would have to put it behind a paywall because it might get a little spicy.
And
but
a referee.
yes, and we need a referee and a scoreboard because I'm big about winning. The people that are going out, because you said now the people that sign the petition become part of so the people that are going out asking for signatures, do they have any liability or whatever if it is found that what's being said is untrue and that it was known to be untrue before that went out?
Potentially, yes. I mean, we're not here. I mean, neither commissioner we haven't gone down that road, and typically it's not worth the squeeze anyway. You're talking about volunteers and people who are, they might step out of line a little bit. It's also really hard to get that proof because you'd have to have somebody who was coming forward saying, this is what they told me in the parking lot when I signed the petition.
Well, I think if they're saying, if they're going to somebody's house and just mentioning one thing and not anything else, does that give any standing there?
Yeah, it does. It does. And again, this is sometimes the legalities and the proof part sometimes don't match up very well. Yeah, sure. If I got a bunch of calls from people saying, hey, I signed that petition and here's what they told me, and it had to do with Seagate and it had to do with the other stuff, I'm definitely going to use that information. Now, are we going to pursue the person that was at the front door? Probably not, because it's not them, it's the petition we got to get rid of. And so that's probably the way I would handle it. Is it's really more about the big picture than just their specific part in it. But yeah, if I had that information, I would certainly use it.
Well, you guys heard that you're watching. Send me an email, and I will
threw
make
that
sure,
softball
I
up.
will make sure that you have Morgan's email address if you want to share what they said to you at the front door, so that you can tell them what exactly happened. So how does this play out, Morgan? I mean, they got 20 days to respond. Will they typically somebody asks for an extension on this, and what's the time frame for this whole thing playing out?
Well, the short answer is we don't know yet, but we got our judges assigned today. We have 2 different judges. So the first thing is probably we'll need to do a motion to consolidate, which we've got prepared. But more importantly is we're going to ask for an expedited hearing. And the way expedited hearings work is really sort of do the best you can, right? Is if the judges have time and availability, maybe it goes a little quicker. If the judges are in a multi-week trial or what have you, and just don't physically have the time, then it's going to take longer. And this is one of the things about doing things on Zoom and things like that. We can do things a little bit quicker. It used to be we just walked over to the courthouse and had to wander from room to room until we found somebody. At least this way we can do it a little bit quicker. But it still is subject to the availability of people's schedules. So not to get too far in the weeds, but you've asked some pretty nuanced questions. There is an ex parte process to do this. Judges really don't like to do it ex parte, which means no side from the other side, particularly when the people are known. So typically, if I walked into a judge's chambers and said, I want to have an ex parte hearing under Rule 1.610, they would say, go get the other side and come back in 5 days, right? And so what will happen is, in all likelihood, is we'll ask for the expedited hearing. Whoever's going to end up representing the recall petitions will coordinate. They may raise objections about different things, but eventually we will get that hearing. That hearing can go any number of ways. It can be an initial hearing to determine what a subsequent hearing will look like. It could be the full-blown hearing. I've had judges say, look, I got next Friday all day. See you at 8 o'clock, right? Let's go. I've had others who are a little bit more, let's meet for 15 minutes and figure out how much time we're going to need, how many witnesses, do we need a special courtroom because of public participation, all those kinds of things. Are there media interests involved? They want to kind of get through the housekeeping part first. That is a lot longer answer than I intended. So I apologize for that. But that's the way it's going to go. We don't really know, but there's going to be a lot of housekeeping, and then eventually we'll get to that.
So does the 60-day clock that Veach and Murphy have started because they're in their second round? How is that? It's not impacted yet, right? Until the judge decides. It's still rolling.
Correct.
Okay. And is there can you give the taxpayers that are watching on Fort Myers Beach, they know it's going to cost them $20,000 to $25,000 to have an election. How much might it cost them they're going to have to reimburse John and Karen for your services? How much might it cost them?
If that happens, yeah. How much are an estimate of the services for a case of this magnitude?
Okay, so that one I am going to punt on because we don't know. Right. One of your someone just asked a good question. Will there be RFAs, interrogatories, or depositions? Is a question. Someone knows. I think someone might be in the legal profession, but so those requests for admissions, interrogatories, or depositions. That's the big unknown. Remember a second ago, I said the judge may sit around and say, what discovery do you need? Might be one of the questions they ask. And they may say, we want to take the commissioner's depositions. And the commissioners will say, I want to take those guys' depositions. In which case the cost, I tell everyone this, and I know we're burning up your hour here, but tort reform, if I had a magic wand, again, tort reform is always focused on the judgment. And most cases don't go to judgment. 94% of cases never go to trial. The cost to you and I of a trial is discovery. And mainly depositions is you take 5 depositions, and that's going to cost you 20 grand, right? I mean, it just is, because you got to prep the witness, you got to be there for half a day, you got to pay the court reporter, it's $1,500 for the transcript. I mean, it just adds up, and all of a sudden you spent $20,000 just like that, and that's not taking into account the cost of a trial. So, to answer your question as best I can, if this was done on a summary judgment basis, then it's probably less than $30,000. Not that bad, right? For both of them.
You have insurance. I don't know.
Yeah.
However, I don't think we'll get off quite that easy. I will do what we can. We're also giving the city a reduced rate because the city attorney made me. So it's not going to be that bad, honestly, unless people go crazy with discovery and depositions and all the rest.
Well, I mean, I was taken aback by 30, not because I think I'm sure you're worth every penny plus more. I'm just saying that it's a small town. You add 25,000 for the election on, it could.
Yeah, but maybe they
up,
have insurance, and they have been in
the
cases.
Insurance won't cover it. They've already looked into that. Maybe it runs $100,000, and what a complete waste of money for the whole thing, $100,000. And I'm just saying, for the people on the beach, that is a lot of money for a small, small town.
I'll tell you what's going to be expensive is the land use case. I just got out of one, and those things could be very expensive.
The land use case.
Yeah.
Yeah, over Seagate.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
That's about it.
So,
there's so many out there. We're trying to
give us your prediction on a scale of 1 to 100. What are the chances that this thing gets dropped?
Dropped?
Judge, not by the other side. You win.
Oh, because I was going to say 0.
I mean, they could decide to do. I don't know about that. Now that they are faced with their own attorney's fees, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a high probability, but
yeah,
that would be a waste of money for them.
Well, I don't disagree, but I'm going to assume it's 0, that they drop it. Look, everyone drinks their own Kool-Aid to some extent, but look, we got I think the much better side of this case until we see some evidence on the other side. Until I see a smoking gun, I just think it's going to be very difficult for this recall petition to go forward. And I think that's probably a fair ask for the electorate is show us the smoking gun, right? Just if you've got a complaint, a real complaint, great. But if you don't, maybe just own up to it and say you don't.
So, on the timeline, I'm trying to think now because as you were talking, they have the days to get the signatures. They keep going on. That process continues on.
60 days to get 15% right now.
And then how do you get the case going like that it might get thrown out before they get to the timeline and an election is called? Do you know what I'm saying? Like
we work as fast as possible.
So it isn't like if there's a case pending that stops
Not
until.
But I think
So wait a minute. So you could not get a chance to prove the allegations false before it goes all the way through?
I think the judge is probably aware of the timing, all right? The judge is aware of the timing.
Yes. Yes, you're both right. Yes, Kim, that is a possibility. But yes, Ed is correct. Judges know what's going on too, right?
Okay.
They read the paper as much as everybody else. They know what the issues are. They know what the timeline is, and they try to work accordingly. And this one in particular, because it does involve a co-equal branch of government, they tend to go out of their way to accommodate whatever schedule needs to be accommodated when it's a co-equal branch as opposed to just a private citizen. Not that they don't for private citizens, for all you judges listening, but there is a certain emphasis when it's government related.
Any final thoughts? We appreciate your time. That was a fast hour. Any final thoughts on?
No, I just have to tell you again, I am really impressed, Ed. You missed your calling. You should, law school, never too old.
Oh, no way. No way. He could not handle himself in a courtroom.
I have to admit.
He could not.
He
prepped so much.
When you started quoting those cases, I read every single one as much as I could because, I don't agree with Seagate. I honestly don't agree with Seagate, but I have been so irritated when people lie about other people. And I believe, it's just my opinion, not accusing anybody of anything. I don't want to get in trouble, but it's just wrong. I just feel like unless you have proof that somebody did something wrong, why should you be able to get away with that? Whether
I mean, where are you living,
I know,
Alice in Wonderland? I mean, doesn't it happen all the time? I mean, isn't this why you guys and why lawyers, male or female, that's what you're there for? Because a lot of this stuff happens a lot where it's based. I'm not saying this is baseless. I'm just saying that term wouldn't be out there if there weren't cases that are, held together with popsicle sticks.
Very true. Very true. So, all right. Well, stay tuned.
Yeah,
this
for
is
sure.
just step one.
How much do we owe you for this?
Yeah, how much we owe you for the hour?
He's paying because he burned it all up.
Thanks, Morgan. Have a great weekend.
First hour free. Okay.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye. All right. That is Morgan. He is the attorney for both John and Karen. And we'll see what happens. Bill and Ray now have 20 days to respond.
But see, that's what you didn't let me know.
I thought we asked every single question, dear.
No, but I was unclear which one you were talking about because I was going to ask him to explain the declaratory and injunctive part.
Well, next time we have him on the show, we'll ask that. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. We'll be at Margaritaville at La Di Da at Margaritaville, and you will be in the dunk tank at La Ola later on. And then on Sunday, we'll be at La Ola for his 15th anniversary, and I will be in the dunk tank at 11 o'clock. Sunday, we're raising money for the
school,
the PTO, and Saturday, you're raising money for the Women's Club. So we hope you can all come out, and thank you all for tuning in. You all have a great weekend. Bye-bye.